Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the Muslim Storytellers podcast, where we empower Muslim writers to bring their stories to life. Whether you're just starting your first draft, polishing your manuscript, or navigating the world of publishing, this is your go-to resource for every stage of your writing journey. Join us as we sit down with editors, book coaches, illustrators, publishers, and industry experts who will guide you, inspire you, and help you share your voice with the world. This is Muslim Storytellers, where your story begins. Let's write your next chapter together. In the second episode, we invite you to take a virtual seat at our July Masterclass, from first draft to publication. In this session, we deep dived into every stage of the publishing process, uncovering the steps that take your story from idea to finished book. I was joined by writer, editor, and creative writing teacher Hajera Khaja, book doula and editor Khadijah Hayley, and award-winning author Ayaan Mohamud. So grab a pen and a notebook because this conversation is packed with gems you won't want to miss. Bismillah, let's begin. Today, inshallah, is the July Masterclass, and the topic of discussion is from first draft to publication. And that basically means that we will be discussing the entire process, the entire breadth of the publishing process, and it will be from different perspectives. It will be from a writer's perspective, an editor's perspective, a book coach's perspective, and so you'll be able to kind of see, from their experiences, what works, what doesn't work, and the different array of experiences that people have within the process. And that's what Muslim Storytellers is about. And just a short introduction, if you don't know about the platform, we are basically a community that is extremely passionate about bringing together Muslim storytellers of all forms from all over the globe, inshallah. And we're really trying to help to increase the quality and diversity of Muslim publishing and Muslim books that exist. And the way we do that is through our forums, our masterclasses. We've now built a directory as well now, and we're hoping to sort of get into the podcasting, blog building, and resource building space as well, inshallah. And so if you've not explored already, please do go on to muslimstorytellers.com and explore, create an account, join our Discord channel as well, and really do be a part of this community and engage with us. The more you sort of tell us what you want, I basically spend my time creating it, inshallah. So we're here to serve Muslim writers, bi'idhnillah. So that's a short introduction from me. My name is Hafsa Dabiri, and the other Hafsa Dabiri is Ayaan, who we will now transfer on to Ayaan to tell you a bit about her, inshallah.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm so excited to be here, and so thrilled that Hafsa decided to put together this masterclass. I've been looking forward to it over the last month. But just to tell you a bit about myself, I am from London, so I'm based in northwest London, and I am a writer, author, and I also work as a medical editor. So I'm not a full-time writer as of yet, which is sad, but the bills have to be paid, so I am juggling that with work. In terms of my writing sort of like background experience, I, alhamdulillah, am an author of 2 books that were published in 2023 and 2024, so relatively new in the writing world, but I write young adult contemporary fiction. So I love writing children's stories, and that's what my passion is, and definitely my track record. My first book was called You Think You Know Me, and both my books are with a publishing house called Usborne, but my first book is called You Think You Know Me, and that was sort of a big book for me to put out there, but it was also the book of my heart because it discussed some really interesting and hard-hitting themes like Islamophobia, and it was really wonderful to debut into the publishing space with a book like that was really unapologetic, and I think it was I didn't think it would be my debut novel, but it was, alhamdulillah, and it worked out for the best. And my second book is called The Thread That Connects Us, also a young adult contemporary, but a lot more about family drama and family secrets, not too heavy on the themes, that one. But I'm also sort of quite academic by my background as well. That's one thing I do like to mention when I'm giving my intros, because I think people always think when you're writing books, like, you just have to be like this creative, very artsy person. And I think you can have, you can have multiple sides to you. So I am also an ex-doctor. So I went to med school. I wrote my first 1.5 books while I was still in med school. Worked as a doctor for about 8 months, left the NHS, and now I work in medical editing. So yeah, that's pretty much the two biggest things that I do in my life. So,
Amazing, mashallah. No, it's really interesting to hear the reality of writing, because I think a lot of people sort of get into the space and think once they've been published, that's it. You just sort of spend your entire life, talking about the book and marketing the book and writing more books. But really, as you said, bills do have to get paid, and it's more about the passion and having it as an outlet, and that being the constant. But yeah, no, mashallah, thank you so much for sharing that, and hopefully in our last email we actually had the links to purchase some of Ayaan's books, so please do check that out if you're able to, inshallah. Okay, so next we have Khadijah, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. So absolutely ecstatic to be here with Muslim storytellers, and I'm really excited to learn from Hajera and Ayaan and Hafsa as well. Those who know me know I'm always mixing things up and finding out different ways to approach the writing space and approach the process. So I'm really looking forward to it. A breakdown of what I do and who I am is officially, my official title is a creativity mentor, book doula and editor. But to be honest with you, I've always struggled to condense what I do into like 1 or 2 labels. So I usually flip between different ones. My main focus really is to put writers first and to focus on their needs and their unique writing process when they're creating a book. Because honestly, there's not one set method or format to being a writer. Every single writer is different. Every story is different. And I want to celebrate that. And instead of just like saying, okay, this is how you have to do it, let's find out what works for you. So I work with women and writers, and I guide them through each stage of the writing process, from the idea to the outline to drafting and to the final manuscript as well. And my goal for each writer is for them to have important writing skills and also have the confidence to break the rules in their own unique way. So to be in the writing space, you do need both confidence and skills, because it can be really scary. It can actually be really scary sometimes. So you need to know that you've got those skills, but also have the confidence to take up space, and to know that you might be doing things differently, but it's still a correct way of doing things, for want of a better word. I actually started out by just sort of being like your average book editor, but I found that like most writers, if not all writers, needed help before they got to the editing stage. It was really counterproductive to just be sending back a manuscript with all these notes on it, when I know that actually maybe earlier on in the process we could have actually prevented a lot of this. So I started launching my mentorships, and I found that not only did writers need less editing when they went through a mentorship, but they actually learned so much from the process that they were then leading themselves through the process for future books and for future space. They were actually lifting themselves up, and that was honestly the best thing for me to see. I've got one-to-one mentorships that usually last from anything from 3 to 6 months, but I've also got the editing services that cover developmental and line edits, and this year I actually launched a group membership called the Writers' Room. And the idea behind this was to create a safe and exclusive space for women writers to actually enjoy every aspect of being a writer, not just the end result, not just having a book out there, but to enjoy the whole process from start to finish, and to enjoy that journey and not speed towards that end result. And even when I'm editing, I kind of build the coaching into it. So I don't like just sending a manuscript back full of changes and sign off and get, okay, off you go. I'm actually working with them, and it's a very collaborative process so that they can understand each change, feel confident in each change, and know that, yeah, I know this isn't stereotypically how we do it, but I know why I've done it this way, and I like it that way. So that way I find that writers have a stronger writing voice. They've got skills that they can apply to future projects, and I get so invested in that. And most of my writers have actually become really good friends of mine, like they're not clients anymore. And I actually pray I get to keep doing this for many years to come, inshallah, because being in this writing space and helping people enjoy that process is just, it's very, very addictive. But that's me in a nutshell on what I do, inshallah.
I love it. I love it. We've already got people in the chat that are like, how do we get access to this? And she will let you know that as soon as possible. Definitely. Right at the end, she's going to also be sharing a bit about a program that she's going to be running soon as well, inshallah. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And inshallah, up next, last but definitely not least, we have Sister Hajera.
Assalamualaikum everyone. Excuse me. Thank you so much, Hafsa, first of all, for launching this platform, for inviting me to be here. I feel a little bit intimidated going last now, but alhamdulillah, I'm really grateful to be here, really grateful to share the space with you and everyone. So I guess my background is actually very similar to Khadijah's, and I was about to say Hafsa, but Ayaan, the name is tripping me up. I guess I started out sort of, so I wear, I think like Khadijah, like many hats. I'm a writer first and foremost. I'm an editor with Ruqayyah's Bookshelf, and I'm also a creative writing teacher. And I love writing. I kind of just started out as a writer. I write short stories primarily, and essays, and picture books as well. I have a short story collection that I'm now, looking to get published. So this is going to be very informative for me too, inshallah. And I started actually sort of working with Ruqayyah's Bookshelf, and around the same time teaching creative writing with an online school where I had taken courses as well. And really loving it. Like, I love talking about craft. I love talking about writing and writing process. But after doing that for a while, I found that although I really loved it, I worked with some very talented writers, mashallah. It's really hard being in a space working with non-Muslim creatives when their writing tends to be about things that go very much against sort of my personal values. And, when you open up a book and you're reading it, you can skip some pages, you can skip some sections, you can choose, okay, this book has a lot of like content that I'm not connecting with, I'm not relating with, so I can just even stop reading the book. But when you're a teacher, you have to give feedback and you have to read stories that other writers are writing. And, just like, they're incredible people and just lovely people, like I really connect with them. But then they're writing about sort of things that I would rather not read. And so I realized that although I loved doing that, it wasn't really the space for me. I felt like very much, I can't keep doing this. And so almost like as an extension of the work that I was doing with Ruqayyah's Bookshelf anyway, I started to kind of doing what Khadijah did, which is the manuscript critiques. And then really finding that I didn't enjoy that either, which is just, coming at the end stage and just giving writers like this feedback and just very impersonal process. And so then I started doing sort of similar kind of going on in the direction of like one-on-one coaching. So working with writers actually and helping them like develop their stories and getting to a final draft that they could love, and then being able to interact with me too as an editor, like asking me questions, and also challenging me, right? Like, I don't, this feedback you're giving me doesn't fully like land. It's not fully landing. Like, how can we arrive at something that works well for the story and also doesn't lose my vision? So I started doing that, and then kind of developed more into like group programs. So now I run a creative writing membership as well for Muslim women called Grounded Writers. And so that's where I love to do like kind of all of the things that I do, which is writing and teaching creative writing, teaching craft, and then helping writers really get to a stage where their writing and their stories are ready for publication, whether they choose self-publishing or otherwise. So it's, and actually, I also do have a medical background, not medical, but like a science background. And when you said that, I was like, oh my God, me too. So I actually did my master's in science. I worked as like a medical writer for a long time, worked in a research group, and then, but I was always a writer and I always loved writing. So alhamdulillah, really grateful that I was able to pivot and do this full time.
Amazing, mashallah. No, I think there's so much yeah, I'm just really excited for the next part of the masterclass, inshallah, because I think, as I was saying to Khadijah earlier, we sort of have very formulaic understanding sometimes about what the publishing process looks like, and I think to hear from Ayaan in terms of what her personal experiences were, but then in terms of Khadijah and Hajera, the people that you've worked with, the experiences that they've had, and how you've been able to sort of show them that the process can be different and they can still become very successful writers, even if they don't follow a certain path that, traditionally that people follow. So yeah, it's going to be an amazing discussion, inshallah. In terms of the structure, just so that everybody is aware, we have 3 questions that I'm going to put to our panelists, inshallah, and they'll all take turns to answer it and sort of have a bit of a conversation around it. And then we will go to your question. So after we've done 3 questions and the panelists have all answered it, it's going to be you all as viewers, as storytellers. We're just going to be answering your questions. So make sure you're putting them into the chat box. There is a Q&A function, but there's also a chat box. So I'll be looking at both of them. The Q&A function works better because obviously it will all be in one place, so I shouldn't, be missing them. But yeah, please do send in your questions. This is a session that for you, and you'll get out what you put in essentially. So engage more with us, and we'll inshallah be answering the questions that you have, inshallah. So let's get started, inshallah. The first question, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. What are some of the biggest challenges authors face when moving from their first draft to a polished manuscript, and how can they overcome them? I know there's going to be a lot of people who are literally sitting there like me. Yeah, I'm the author who has issues and obstacles. So yeah, Bismillah, who wants to take the floor first?
Okay, I'll go. Quiet. To be honest, when I first saw that question, I was like, that's so broad. But ultimately, because like I said, when I was giving my introduction, like every writer is different. So every writer is going to come up with their own struggles. But from my experience, some of the most common ones is one, a confidence to show up in the space. They actually feel like they don't belong here until they've got a book on bookshelves in a store. Like they feel that they can't call themselves a writer until they've published. So there's that confidence of not being allowed to be in this space. Being overwhelmed with ideas and trying to put all those ideas into one book. Like, it doesn't have to be, you can be open to more than one book, but I think people think like, oh, let me just do this one, and then all the ideas that they've tried to put into one, and that's when they get into a bit of a mess. Time management, having to, you need to prioritize it. If you're going to be a writer, it has to be part of your priority. It's not just something you're dabbling in, it's a priority. That doesn't mean you have to sit for hours in a cafe, like in some stereotypical nice little writing image, but it does mean that it needs to be prioritized in some way. And honestly, the biggest one, I think, is not enjoying the process. And that might be a hard pill for some people to swallow. But I do think there are a lot of writers in the space who they are in love with the idea of being a writer, of having a book, but they're not necessarily invested in all the things that come with that. So they're trying to speed towards this end result instead of just savoring and basking in the glory of the process of being a writer. And I always kind of compare it to somebody who loves cooking and says that they want to be a chef, but they exclusively use like cooking jars, and they don't want to like cook from scratch or do any of the other things. So they don't want to use the fresh ingredients. And yeah, the jars will get the job done and you can eat it. It'll be nutritious. It'll be fine. But something's missing. They're going to be missing something, and it's that heart. And because they don't actually enjoy all the process, because I'm the first one to say that I will happily use a cooking jar when I'm making food. I don't want to sit there making my pasta from scratch, but there are people who like doing that and they enjoy that process. And I think it's the way to overcome that is to identify what kind of writer are you. Do you want a book, or do you want to be a writer? Which one is it? Because once you accept that, you can then decide where you fit in and which parts of the process you enjoy and can really sort of bask in. I think that's the best word I can use, to just bask in the glory of it.
Yeah,
I
sorry. I was just going to say, as a writer, yeah, I feel like you were coming for me, but in the best way possible. Honestly, I was just sitting there thinking, I always like to say to my husband, yeah, I need to go to a cafe today. I just need to get out of the house and I need to write. And recently I had a deadline and I just found myself writing in the car, writing in the kitchen, writing as I'm, trying to get to sleep. I'm typing away on my phone. And it's like, when you like need to get down something onto paper, you're not going to be able to find, the romantic vibes that you.
But you know what? That's romantic. That's the thing. That is
I really enjoy it. I was literally like, I'm so busy, guys. Like I was like going to visit somebody in the car, and I was like, sorry, I've got to finish this chapter first. And I was just like, yeah, this is me. This is the writing. This is
it where you can, and it's priority. That is romantic in the sense. I'll never forget when I read Stephen King's book on writing, and he talks about when he wrote his first draft of Carrie, and for a lot of his first draft, he's in like this tiny little laundry room, sat on this stool, because it was the only place he could get any kind of peace. And I always imagine him surrounded by like dirty towels or like clothes, like a washing machine banging at the side. And like, I thought, that's not what we're normally fed, but look at how many books he's got. So there is romance in the messiness and then trying to fit it in everywhere. That being a writer, we need to embrace that. It doesn't mean we haven't got time for it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Sorry, Ayaan, you wanted to sort of chip in there as well.
Yeah, I was just going to jump on the bandwagon and just say, like, people, it is so easy to romanticize being a writer and the writing. And it's just, I think a lot of that comes from social media as well. And just, you know, the dreams we have, you know, as kids. And, you know, you dream of being an astronaut as a kid as well, or like, you know, a singer. But it's just like, there is a lot of work that needs to go on behind the scenes to become that person. So yeah, it's really understanding, like, what are you chasing here? You know, do you enjoy the process and the writing and seeing these words come together beautifully into a story that you've made, and then hoping that gets published and gets put on the shelf? Or is it just you're aiming for a space on the shelf regardless of what kind of story you put on there? And I think the other thing that's quite hard as well, like going from first draft to polished manuscript, is like the noise beyond like romanticizing it yourself. I think like I think writing communities are amazing, and I think it's so beautiful for people to come together and work towards, you know, individual passions but together. But I also think there's space for like cutting out that noise sometimes and just sitting down and doing the hard work, you know, because at the end of the day you are the person to get yourself over the finish line. And I'm just thinking about my own experience writing my debut, which actually happened to be the first book I ever wrote. And I think even though I look back at that time and just think, how did I manage that? Because it was, you know, to go from having written like just a bunch of short stories and never getting past beyond like 10k or 15k words to like writing an 80k story, I really had to sit down and just figure out, like, how did I do that? And I think it came from just not being anywhere frequently where there was, you know, I was in a position to be hearing a lot of noise from other people. I think there is a point for having those conversations streaming and hearing different perspectives, and definitely feedback comes into that much later on. But, you know, you need to be the one that sits down and gets the work done, because otherwise it will just be something you're thinking about forever, just something that lives in your notes page, and it's just never going to make it through. Probably the other thing that I thought about with that question was just like also accepting that your work is going to needs to get so much better. Like, you know, I thought that with my first draft of You Think You Know Me, I just thought it was the best thing ever in the world. And I do look back at my first drafts now and I can't even read them because they're so terrible. They're so horrible to read, and it actually hurts my soul looking back over them. So I can only manage it for a minute or so, because it's so different to the finished products and actually what made it onto the shelves. I think there is obviously space, you know, you should feel so much satisfaction and joy after finishing the first draft, but just know that the job is not done there, and you need help to get over the finish line, and you need help from people who you trust, who you know the feedback that they give you is worth, you know, its weight in gold. Like that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that initial first draft is such a gritty and difficult experience, in the sense that you just have to keep pushing through. You have to keep putting the words onto paper. You have to keep developing the story without sort of, you know, trying to aim for perfection at that point, just really trying to sort of get the words out. And I think a lot of people think that, okay, I've done all of that hard work, that must mean that I've sort of written the book and it's ready. But you're so right in the sense that after that, it's a whole different experience. It's a whole different process of fine-tooth combing and changing narratives, and, like, you know, working on dialogue and character and plot. And there's so many different aspects that, you know, it's one thing to write, and it's another thing to then write it to be read, and write it to be enjoyed, and write it to be cohesive. And so that whole editing process is, yeah, it's gritty in a different way to the writing process, essentially. And it takes a whole different set of skill. I think that initial first draft is mostly just about being able to be consistent and find the time and build a schedule, and learn to enjoy the process as well. But the editing process, you have to be able to kind of take critique. You have to be able to not be too attached to a certain narrative or a certain storyline or a certain character. And you have to be willing to kind of develop things for the better of the entire book. And sometimes, you know, as you said, you know, you kind of came back and you're like, yeah, I don't want to read this ever again. And you know, you're gonna be happy with that end product, because, as you know, depending on the process as well, in terms of how close you are with the editor and the editing, and how true you are staying to yourself, as Khadijah was kind of saying that, you know, in her process, she ensures that she's kind of working through the editor at every stage, with the writer at every stage. The outcome, inshallah, should be something that you're even more happy with and even more proud of, inshallah. So don't be too attached to that first draft, but definitely keep it. It's a point to sort of to kind of look back on it later is really beautiful. So Sister Hajera, this question as well, inshallah.
Yeah, I'm trying. I mean, as everyone was talking, I was trying to think of like what points I want to elaborate on, and I think I feel like I want to elaborate on everything. And I also I guess I've worked. I mean, I've been writing for like, you know, more than a decade, right? So and I've had short stories that have been published. You know, I've gotten like nominated for awards and things like that. So I've been in the writing space for such a long time, and I really like to push back a little bit on all of the things that that I think have actually kept me back from progressing in my writing career, because I was told all of these things. Your first drafts are going to be terrible. You're going to need to do like a lot of editing. You're going to need to get advice from critique partners, from writing teachers. And so all of those things are important. And I don't want to like dismiss them and discount them, because I think they, you know, absolutely, like feedback from my writing teachers has helped me become a stronger writer. But I think that like I love, Khadijah, when you were talking about confidence, because I think that for me, it was almost like I have to make it as a writer. And in order to make it as a writer, I have to spend like these 10 years just writing stuff that is not going to be good. And then it's going to be good, and then I can get published. And there's this really famous quote that always I see it come up again and again. It's by this American writer, Ira Glass. Has anyone heard that quote? It's about I don't know, maybe someone can Google it and pull it up. But basically, like this idea that in the beginning, your writing's going to be bad. And it's just through like the reps that it's going to get better. So you just have to like keep at it, keep writing, and then it's going to get better. And I had that like literally on the about page of the website when I started working with writers, because I was still very much in that space where this is how it's going to be. And for me, things really started shifting when, you know, I started like kind of working one-on-one with writers who had never taken creative writing before, like never taken any courses before. And they just had a story that they really felt compelled to write, and they really believed in telling this story. And I was really astounded. Like I was really astounded at how great writers there were, mashallah. And that with just like a little bit of teaching things, like, okay, you know, dialogue, like this is kind of like how we write dialogue. So just make sure you're watching out for these things. Or like, okay, you're not really staying in scene here. Like try this, like, you know, so little things like incrementally, like getting them to practice these things in their writing, like tremendous improvement in just like a month, 2 months, 3 months, right? With some writers, it does take longer. Like, so it really does depend on kind of everybody's initial skill level and stuff, but certainly not anywhere close to like what we're taught, like 10 years, or that your first drafts are terrible. Like the first draft itself had like so much promise that it really just like turned all these ideas that I had about writing on their head. Is that the expression? And so now it's like, you know, I look back and I think about the process that I went through, and yes, absolutely, I will read some of my work from like, you know, 15 years ago and be like, okay, I clearly, like I needed to learn things, right? So writing is a skill, but at the same time, it wasn't terrible. Like I've been, you know, writing for such a long time, and I think that sometimes we keep hearing writers say that too, that like your stuff is going to be terrible, it's going to be terrible. And then you read it and you're like, okay, yeah, I can see that it's not definitely like what I'm writing now, but it's also not terrible. Like there's beautiful things in that first draft, and that's what gives you or that's the things that you take from that first draft which lead you to kind of your final draft, right? So I just wanted to mention that, just to not discourage anyone that your writing is terrible if you've never taken like a craft course before, or that, you know, if it's your first draft, it has to be terrible. Like it doesn't have to be. I think just kind of going back to the question about challenges that authors face, I think from my perspective, as an editor now, and as someone who's kind of also like worked on my own stories, is that I think a lot of writers kind of struggle with being open to seeing that their first draft, seeing that their final draft can be more beautiful than their first draft. Like it's almost like you know, like Ayaan was saying, you write something and you feel like I've done my best work. But really appreciating the process, that this is creativity. Like we are creative beings, and just because we wrote something doesn't mean that we can't write anything more beautiful than that within the same story. And so I think going back to what Khadijah was saying, like enjoying the process, like also treating your writing just as play, like as play. Like when you have writing that you reach towards as an act of creativity, as something that you're like engaging in for fun and for fulfillment, then you know, the way that I see it almost is like having a product come out of that, like a picture book or a novel or a short story, is inevitable. It's like it's what comes out of the fact that you have a writing practice, that you love writing, that it's something that you enjoy doing, like creating stories or even memoir, right? Like writing about your life. But I think taking that, recognizing that you can take that same process to revision as well, and treat revision also as play, and just, you know, not thinking of it as like, I wrote something beautiful, it's going to mess up if I change anything, but I wrote something beautiful, let me play around with it and see if it can be made more beautiful. And I think really like that's kind of the struggles that I see with writers sometimes, where they're scared to do anything to a first draft. And so I always tell them, like, you have the first draft, like it's saved, it's not going anywhere. So if you don't like, you know, where you're going, you can always come back to that first draft. So I think that's kind of with like newer writers, but then even with more experienced writers, like sometimes I find that they'll do a couple of drafts and then just kind of get frustrated or demotivated and then give up. But there's always this kind of messy middle where you're still trying to figure out what the story wants to be. And so I think just trusting the process and really reminding yourself again and again that, like, I wrote that first draft and I love that first draft. I can write another story, or I can write another version of that story that's even more beautiful and that does all the things that I want to do in a very beautiful way. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
no, I just add on to that actually, because you just said something then that made me, like, my brain just started sparking. And when you say like trust the story that's coming out, you know, I think sometimes we get so hung up on what the story was in our head, what we wanted to write, and then when we start writing it, something different happens, and the writing that we wanted to do isn't kind of working. And when we keep trying to go down that path and blocking off what's actually coming out, then it can become a really frustrating process. And I always say to my writers, if there's anyone here, I recognize a few names, they're going to sort of roll their eyes because I kind of like drum this into everybody. But I always say that, like, technique is like the last thing. There's 3 things you need to be a writer, and it's passion for the writing process, for books, for reading, for stories. That needs to be your passion, not just, oh yeah, I've read a bit, or I've not read since school, or what. Like, no, that's not going to cut it. You need to have an absolute passion for this world that you're in. Have a purpose and know why you're writing, why you have chosen to say this, why you have been chosen to tell this story. And usually what happens, then you've got technique. And those 2 things feed into your technique without you realizing it. If you are passionate and you are reading constantly and actively, you are picking up things, your technique is building in the background without you realizing it. But what some people do is they rush to technique. Just tell me how to be a writer. How can I write this thing? And usually I'll say, okay, let's find some books. First thing I do in my writing is I get a book list sorted. Like, let's get some books that you're going to be reading and you're going to be enjoying, so you can enjoy this space. And then usually the technique just kind of slots in there, and before you know it, you're learning it without even realizing.
Yeah, 100%. No, that's amazing. And I think even like from my perspective as well, in between the moments where I'm like really, really struggling with a book, I'm like, let me just go to my TBR and pick out a few that I'm going to focus on this week.
Yeah.
Especially within the niche that I'm trying to write about. I'll just be like, okay, I need to read more chapter books or early readers or whatever it may be within that space. So no, I definitely agree with that, and I would push that on to more people, inshallah, to sort of really consider that. I think, okay, because of time, let's do a vote. Question 2 or question 3? Which one is more? Do we think we should focus on more?
Ooh, they're really good questions. I'm trying to think, like, what does everybody else want to, like, what do they want?
What I can do is I can read out question, like everyone can answer either or, basically. So I'll read out question 2 and question 3, and then you can take whichever one that you want to answer, inshallah. I'll put them into the chat box as well, so that everybody kind of knows what we're referencing, inshallah. Give me 30 seconds. Okay, they're now in the chat box. So question 2 is, can you share your insights on choosing between self-publishing and traditional publishing, and what factors should an author consider before making this decision? And then the third question is, what role do editors play in shaping a manuscript, and how can authors build strong, productive relationships with their editors? So whichever question you'd like to answer, please take it. Ayaan, should we start with you? Are you happy with that? Okay, inshallah. Bismillah.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I'm kind of leaning towards question 1, because I am, and I can't really speak much to self-publishing, but I can talk more about my traditional publishing experience. So just to sort of give a background to how I ended up going down that route is, it was 2020 when I wrote the first draft of what happened to be my debut, and I ended up sort of finishing that over 2020, sort of bits and pieces here and there, fitting that in around uni. And then I picked up something called we have in the UK something called the Children's and Something Writers Yearbook, which is basically something that's a book that's published every single year, and it's a directory of like all of the agencies and agents in the UK, and you can see what they're specializing in and things like that. So for me, going down that route of finding an agent, querying, going on submission with an agent. I'm just trying to condense the whole thing because I'm just like, it was so long. But going on submission, once you have an agent, and hoping that's picked up by an editor at publishing house, that was the route that I decided to go down, because I knew one thing I didn't have on my hands was time. And it was a struggle to even find time to write and shape the story and thinking about doing anything else beyond that. And when you are self-publishing, you're pretty much doing everything on your own. It was pretty easy. It was pretty much an easy decision for me to make. At the time I was in uni, and the only thing I had time to focus on was a story. So that was one element of it. But the other bit was, for me, visibility. And of course, there's no guarantee you will be traditionally published. There's no guarantee you'll ever find an agent, or if you go on submission, your book will get picked up by an editor. If it does, there's no guarantee it will go through acquisitions meetings, which is the meetings that they have at publishing houses, where everyone has to decide a book is sort of good to go, and they will put some money where their mouth is, basically. So there's no guarantee that any of those things will happen. But for me, I was like, if all of those things align, those things do happen, then what I will have is visibility of stories featuring Muslim characters, Somali characters, in a space where you don't see any of that representation, and see it as or see that authentically as well, because obviously there are so many Muslim experiences, but one thing I was not getting much of was the experience of someone who really likes their faith, loved their faith, wanted to follow it, wanted to practice it. I think that's just so important for children to see in books, young adults, So for me, it was pretty easy to make that decision to try going down the traditional publishing route. And alhamdulillah, it ended up working out for me. It's not something I think I would have been able to, in terms of getting that visibility impact, I don't think I would have been able to manage that going down the self-publishing route, because I didn't have to think about marketing, I didn't have to think about design, cover design, like any of that. I just had to focus on the work and making sure it was the best that it could be. So I mean, everyone has their preferences. Everyone has their capacity as well. Some people want full control over the whole process. I think that can be really great, especially if you don't trust who you're working with. But alhamdulillah, I ended up working with people who were very good to me and the story, and allowed me to put out a story that I was like still incredibly proud to publish, and it wasn't like stripped down or anything like that. It was pretty much like in your face and Islamic, and I really appreciated that. So yeah.
Amazing, mashallah. No, I think that was a really amazing summary of sort of the process and the pros and cons of going down each route. Someone actually wanted a bit of background from you in the Q&A section. So they said you mentioned that you weren't coming from a writing background. How did you begin your writing journey, and how did you find the confidence and skills needed to write a book without formal education?
Oh, yeah. So yeah, I didn't come from an experienced writing background at all. I mean, like most writers, I loved reading and writing like all through school. Like I was obsessed with it. I was like always entering competitions and like joining writing clubs and all of that. And, you know, sadly, it did fall away when I went to uni. And I was pulled into the academic dark side a little bit. And I was away from home for the first time. And, you know, I really lost my way with all of that. But alhamdulillah, I think a couple of years I went dark creatively, and then I managed to come back, and it was just a spark, you know. It was just a spark. I always say that there was so much. I think as well, like barakah is something you can't really underestimate, because I think that's really what has like led me to be sitting here and saying that I published 2 books. But I think what Hajera was saying as well is so in terms of like not having, you can write a book and not have any craft experience, because I went into writing You Think You Know Me, which was my debut, having I never went to a writing class. I just said I wanted to write a book and this is what I want it to be. The most I did actually was I googled sort of like how to write a book, and then it came up with a list of things, and I found this course on Udemy. Is it Udemy? And I'd never heard of the platform before, but there was an author who was doing a course on like how to write a best-selling book, and I was like, ooh, that sounds like what I need. And actually it was really helpful, because she was describing something called a process called Save the Cats. And I'd never heard of that before, but it was basically like a 15-step process where you like write down the key beats of your story. I think it was like originally like produced for screenwriting and then like adapted for novel writing. And it's like, you know, this percent of the way through the story, this happens and this happens and this happens. And because I am quite academic, I did enjoy having that formula to follow. I was like, okay, I have a roadmap, like I can work with this, I know what to do. So I set off to write the first draft, which yeah, obviously didn't end up being, it wasn't great. I thought it was great, but it's about having promise. So like all of the technical skills weren't in that first draft, but there was something in there that caught the attention of my agent and my now agent, who, you know, back then said she was interested, and I worked with her over a few months to revise and resubmit, and it took a few months, but she did it, you know, accept me as one of her clients. So yeah, you don't need, I think, yeah, the passion and what Khadijah was saying, the passion, and there was something else, two things that feed into the technique. I think that's definitely like how it works for me, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, we'll segue into your segment now, Khadijah, inshallah. Which question will you be tackling?
Sure. Oh, well, do you know what? I've been screaming in support of self-published authors this week, but I do feel like I should go into the editor question, because it is one of the things that I get asked the most anyway. So that one is speaking to me, so I'll take that one. So the question is, what role do editors play in shaping the manuscript, and how can authors build strong and productive relationships with them? So first of all, I think it's important to understand what an editor's job is. A lot of people go into this thinking, oh, I'm going to send you my manuscript and you're going to make it brilliant, and I'm just going to sit back and then get a really nice thing back. Like, no, it does not work like that. So the editor's job is to bond with the author, to understand what their vision is, and then balance that vision with the experience of what they know will work. And that's what the job is of an editor, to take it and think, right, okay, I can see it goes for this, that, and the other. And there are so many styles that are out there. So it's about seeing what that author's particular style is as well. Not thinking, oh, we can make this into this fancy, you know, classical, we can do Babel by R.F. Kuang, for example. You know, we can turn it into this fantastically academic book. Or it can be something really sweet and innocent, like a rom-com. You've got to be able to identify the writer's style to know where you're going to fit it in. And that's the first thing. So then the editor should be able to guide the writer's vision to come through and discover what their aim is for the book, and have it come through with either structure changes or deeper development or stronger characters. So asking, what's the most important thing for your book? What is it that you want your book to say? What is it you want your characters to do? How do you want your readers to feel when they finish reading your book? What do you want them to think? Do you want them to think a certain way after reading your book? Once those things are lined up, I can then, or any other editor can then look at it and go, right, okay, if you want that, we need to do this, this, and this. But it's about working with the writer. And I know not all editors do this, but thankfully more and more are starting to do this and be more collaborative. But you need to be able to be open with your editor. You need to feel comfortable and you need to trust them. You know, like I was saying, even in the traditional space, you have to be able to trust the editor and know that, oh, they understand what I'm working on. They understand what I want to say with this, and they're not going to rain on it. They're not going to tear it apart. Like, they actually know what I want to do with it, and they're going to help me make it better. But you have to then be open with your editor and be realistic and be honest about what it is you want your book to do. So you have to be an active participant, is what I'm saying. You have to be there. You have to show, if they offer Zoom calls, you know, to actually have a chat and get familiar, take up those Zoom calls. Some people have them optional, take them. You know, always have a conversation with the editor before you agree to work with them. See if there's a way you can have a chat so you can see that your vibes match each other. Because if, for example, you have got this very clear way of doing things, or you want something very, very structured or whatever, and then you find out the editor's just like, oh, you know, whatever, we'll do it whenever we can. You know, you want somebody to be able to really hold your hand. You need to find out that your vibe matches theirs, because it is a partnership at the end of the day. So the thing is to remember, editing is more often about opinions. There's not really a lot of scope for straight up right and wrong. There are a few things that, yes, it has to be this, it has to be that, but overall, it's an opinion. It is just one opinion of one editor thinking, I think this will sell. I think this will work. That doesn't mean there are not another 4, 5, 10 ways that you could edit this book that could work. So you need to find the editor with the way that you think, I like that. That's the one that I like. And you have to sort of like match with that. So be honest about what you want, and also look at how they engage in the genre that you want to write. So sometimes I will see like some editors like, oh yeah, I'm doing all of this, or I'm editing all of this. And I actually had a conversation with somebody who was breaking into the editing space. And she said, oh, I want to edit romance novels. I was like, oh, what's your favorite romance? And she struggled to come up with one. And she was like, oh, I like Pride and Prejudice. And there were some generic answers. I was like, you need to, if you are editing in that genre, you need to be reading what's already out there. What's out there now? What's selling? What are publishers leaning towards? What's the reading space? You need to be present in the reading space as well. So if your editor's doing those things, you can then trust them to know the reading space, know the publishing space, and know what's available. The last bit of advice I will give as well is, like I said, be honest about what you want, not just in how the process is going to go, but what you're going to get out of it. So try and be clear on what your package is. So when you're paying those prices, because anybody out there who has looked into getting an editor knows that those prices can get sky high and keep on going. They can be really high. It's probably one of the biggest investments, especially if you're self-publishing. It's probably going to be one of the biggest things you pay for. And so you need to know what you're getting for that money. What is it? Are you getting just one read through? They're just going to put some comments in and send it back and go, right, off you go. I've given you my tips. And then you would then have to book another round. That is the way some editors work. So be very clear on what you're doing. Are you going to get, like I said, Zoom calls? Are you going to get a chance to have Zoom calls and have a chat with them if that's what you want to do? Are you going to be able to ask follow-up questions? This is another really big thing. And I started offering follow-up questions when I realized that that's what writers needed. Because especially the self-published ones, and you know, the amount of times I'll have conversations where a writer is going, oh, should this comma go here, or should this, you know, they've just had a read through and they've just had like a last minute panic and they want to check with me. I'm like, yeah, talk to me, what is it? But not all editors offer that. So if you are going to need follow-up questions, if you want to discuss your edits, find out beforehand whether the editor offers it, or if they're just going to add their annotations and their advice and send it back to you, and then you're on your own then. And if you need more help, you have to book another round. Find out what is available and if it vibes with you, and have a chat with them. Make sure you're on the same page. Make sure you're able to have a laugh and have a joke, because it is one of the most intimate relationships you will have in the process of producing your book. So those are some of my top tips for the editing relationship.
Amazing, mashallah. You actually answered a few of the questions that people had in the chat box as well, which is amazing. I think we'll have Sister Hajera's segment now, just to kind of, what I'll do is, after you've sort of answered your question, I'm also going to ask you the questions that are related to you in the chat box as well. And then we're just going to do a quick fire. I'm going to quickly go through the last few questions that we have. And if it's a yes and no, you have to give it a yes or no. And if it can be a 5-word answer, let it be a 5-word answer as well. So just to make sure everybody has kind of got like an answer to their questions, inshallah, before we end off. So Sister Hajera, inshallah, which question are you choosing for the last part?
So I can talk about sort of my role as an editor at Ruqayyah's Bookshelf, but if that's specific to the work that I do with that publishing company. So if there are other questions that you think would be more beneficial to everyone, then I'm happy to sort of.
No, I think that would be a really good question, because there are a few people who have asked about what editors look for in terms of children's books, manuscripts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of sort of the work that I do at Ruqayyah's Bookshelf, when we have manuscripts come in, there's so I'm not the first reader, so we have someone else who kind of like goes through all of the manuscripts and kind of picks the ones that have potential, essentially, or not really have potential, but ones that might be of interest to the publisher. Whether it's and most of the time it's really just having a strong idea, having a unique idea that you're exploring in your story, because a lot of topics have already been written about, and I think it's helpful to remember that. And so what we're looking for isn't like something completely brand new, but more just what's your unique take on this topic, or what's the story that only you can write. And then once we kind of have a short list, I guess, or even a long list, like then we'll have a discussion about, okay, which ones should we actually move forward with for publication. And that can honestly, I just want to mention this because sometimes like the stories are really good, they're really strong, but publishing is business, right? So from the publisher's perspective, either, they may already have a story in the works that they're working on, which is on the exact same topic, like very similar. And we recently had a story like that I really loved, but the publisher, after a chat, we decided, okay, we can't proceed with it just because we're already currently working with a story that's very, very similar, right? And so it's just the timing isn't right, or it's like, this isn't the right publishing house for this book because we've already put out kind of X number of books on this topic. And so publishers always have that in the back of their minds, and they have to, because it's, it's business and they have to survive, and they have to really be able to continue to offer that space for writers to have their books published. So I just want to put that out there, that I know that rejection always hurts, but it's not, honestly, most of the time it's never about the writing or the quality of the stories. There's always like business decisions that need to be made. But once we do move forward with the story, then I have a Zoom call with the publisher, with the author, and we kind of like talk about the draft that came into us. We talk about, kind of like how I envision the story that could be taken to a final draft. So essentially my role is to guide the author through the revision process. But in that first meeting, we kind of settle on a direction. So I'll share some thoughts that I have. I'll ask them like why they wrote this story, like give me some context. Why do you love this story? Like what's really important to you about this story? And so we'll come together sort of at a place where we're all in agreement on, okay, this is the direction that we're going to take the story in, and these are the parts that we're going to keep. We can work on these parts a little bit, and then I sort of have Zoom meetings with the author until we reach the final draft, really. And it can vary. Like with some authors, it's within 2 or 3 rounds, like we're done, and then I do kind of the line edits, copy edits, send them back to them for final approval. Some stories do take very long. Like it's just, again, like appreciating that this is a creative process. And so we do have, we don't have like super hard deadlines. Obviously deadlines are important and it's important to get things done in a timely fashion. But what I love about working at Rafai's Bookshelf, what I love about that is really that we're very open to the process. And so if a writer is struggling, I'll say, okay, let's hop on a call, like tell me what you're struggling with. Or, if midway, like we're running into issues with the direction that we're taking, we're very open to like brainstorming, seeing like what you're struggling with, and really making sure that at the end of the day, the book that we put out is one that the author loves and one that we love having worked on as well. So I hope that answers kind of the question a little bit.
No, it definitely does. Amazing, mashallah.
Yeah.
Let me just have a look and see if there's anything specifically. Okay, so someone asked, right now no one knows that I'm writing. To my family, I'm not doing anything with my life, and I don't think they take it seriously yet, so I'm writing until I have a book to my name, but it also means I cannot afford coaching at the moment. What's your advice for me? So I think we kind of spoke about the idea of coaching before and the role that it plays, but if in 5 words you could just give advice to the sister, anybody at this point, inshallah.
I'll take that. Read. That was my
Someone has a question about the reading. So someone said, I have 2 books.
Actually, can I just jump in and say I was in that place for a very, very long time. Like I couldn't afford taking writing classes. I couldn't like afford anything. And so reading definitely, but also keep writing, because it's like you can give up and you can feel demotivated that you can't, get somewhere. But the only way that you can get somewhere is by continuing to write. So don't give up on your writing.
And I would also say there's a multitude of free resources. There are free courses online. There is YouTube. There are free one-to-ones that you can have with editors. There are books about writing. There is writing itself that kind of will help you to improve the muscle. There are competitions that you can enter and you can get free feedback. There is so many free things to explore. So if it's something that you are genuinely passionate about, don't think about money. Think about how you can make the most of the place that you're in right now. You can write without there being a financial element to it, essentially.
And be in the writing space as well. Exactly. Be in the writing, be around writers.
Yeah, there are free communities, group chats,
all writing pages, all that kind of stuff, so that you're in that mindset and you'll pick up so many things.
Yeah, join our Discord channel. We haven't officially launched it yet, but if you sign up as a and create a Muslim Storytellers account, you should be able to access the Discord through the website as well. And there you'll be able to kind of send in feedback and ask for feedback from individuals who are writing within your niche. You'll be able to kind of have access to writing prompts and all of the stuff. So there are lots and lots of free resources out there, inshallah. So don't think that money is an issue, and find your community, inshallah.
Just to add to that as well, sorry, quickly. Just quick. You just have to take yourself seriously before anyone else will ever take you seriously. And that doesn't mean like your book has to be on a bookshelf. It just means you take yourself seriously as a writer and you're dedicated to your craft. And everyone else might just think you're being silly and you're just wasting time on something that will go nowhere. But you need to have that belief, like really, really, really in your core in order for that to drive you forward.
Yeah, and that's anything in life, really. Yeah, that's anything in life. Even for me as a mum, even not just as a mum, like with every role that you have in your life, it's so easy to kind of minimize your role as a writer and say that everything else takes precedent. And that's how your life will turn out if you don't then prioritize the idea of writing and you kind of working your way towards the outcome that you want, inshallah. So make lots of dua and keep pushing through, inshallah. Okay, so the reading question, someone said, I have 2 books all written out in my noggin, but fear halts me in my tracks every time I try to begin, and I go on random life side quests. I've been reading, but it seems I'm using reading and planning as a crutch. How do I get past the crippling self-doubt and fear?
So unfortunately, you just have to be in that scary space. The best way to soothe your inner critic is to prove them wrong. And if you are using, I always get my writers to, when we're coming up with a schedule, so I'll help them come up with a writing routine of how to get their book done. And we always have 2 times that we schedule. We've got writing time and we've got inspiration time. Those are 2 different things. So what's happening is reading, for example, would go in inspiration time. Research goes in inspiration time, so that you are keeping that writing time as completely sacred. And you have to write in that, because there's so many times sit down, okay, I'm going to write my book. Oh, but now I need to find out what the effects of chloroform are on, you know, a body. That's just showing what kind of books I'm writing at the moment. But like, do you know what I mean? You can end up getting caught up in what you're researching for your book and then calling it writing time, and it's not. Same with reading. You could call, oh, but I'm learning about the craft, and oh, I'm doing a writing class, but you're not writing anything. So it's important to schedule those 2 times. And when you are scheduling your writing time, set a timer, even if it is just 5 minutes. If you're really scared and it's become a huge, you've got 5 minutes, write whatever. No one's going to read it. No one's reading it but you. And what you're doing is, and it's kind of similar to what Hajera was saying, you know, when you're saying you're allowing your writing to be bad and accepting that your writing is bad at the beginning, and sometimes that's not always the case. That is definitely true. But I think sometimes we are hesitant when we're writing. And there's this other quote that's about, it's like turning on a faucet or turning on a tap. And at first it's just glug coming out. It's like murky water, but then the longer you leave it running, the water starts to run clear. And writing can be very much like that. So you feel that it's really bad, and you might be writing and it sounds like, you know what, my 2-year-old sister could probably write better than this. It might feel like that in the moment, but keep writing anyway. My biggest mantra, and I put it in all of my like newsletters, everything, is write fearlessly. Even if you're scared, you know, there's that saying that like bravery isn't the absence of fear, it's just you're doing it anyway. Write anyway. Prove that inner mean girl wrong, that hey, guess what, you've done it. And just be secure in the fact that nobody's going to read it. It's just your first draft. It's just you're playing with it at the moment, and you're just writing it. And then eventually that confidence will start to break through, and find people you trust. Find people you trust in this writing space that you can lean on and get their opinion on, who you feel safe with.
100%. No, I completely agree with you. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Yeah, I'm really hoping everyone is grasping all of these gems. I'm going to go through the last.
I'm trying to keep it as concise as possible.
No, honestly, we're almost rounding up, so it's good. Like this is the position that we should be in at this time, inshallah. This one is a bit of a complex question. So Dina, I think what I'll do is I will send this question to the group chat with the panelists, inshallah. And then we'll put a response on our stories for you, inshallah. So please do have a look at that, inshallah, on Instagram. Let me just do that now before I forget and lose it. And then we had a question from, let me have a look, Saida, who said, do you recommend spending money on marketing a book? While budgeting a book while self-publishing, do you recommend keeping some amount for marketing? As I actually do author marketing as one of my jobs as well. I currently work with authors under a lot of different brands. And so I work with authors who have been published by Cube, who have been published by hybrid publishers, just a range of people, Allahumma barik, alhamdulillah. And I always say that you should have some sort of budgeting for your marketing, and it doesn't need to be a huge amount. It just needs to be what you can afford, and we basically make the most of what you can afford. But definitely have something within your allocation for marketing, especially if the publishers that you're working with don't do the marketing for you. Yeah, that's what I would say, inshallah. If you have any other questions, please do message me. And then we had, I think this will be the last question, and it's probably going to be, I don't know if we can do this in one word, so I'll say everybody has a minute to answer, inshallah. AI, should a writer use it or stay away from it? Is it a friend or a foe of a writer? Khadijah might best.
It's foe. It's a foe. To keep it really quick, it is a foe. It is. Let's just put aside the moral ethics in how AI is developed. You know, the impact it's having on the environment in order to keep it cool. We'll put all of that aside for the politicians and just talk about it in terms of the writing process. And it goes back to me saying about that, you know, cooking by jars, using AI for something like research or outlining, or even just checking, is this idea already out there? Like, you know, just any of these things that you want to ask, you are using a cooking jar. Because one of the most beautiful processes of writing is the research stage. It's opening up books or going to different places to find your information, and actually coming across little crumbs of other ideas and other things that you can explore in your book. That's all part of being a writer, and it's part of the process. So don't cut that corner for the sake of ease. And then also the fact that AI is actually harming a lot of creatives, not to mention the amount of books that were stolen by Meta to train their AI, and all the other AIs that, you know, have probably been doing it as well. Meta's the one that just got caught. You know, it is actually stealing from other writers and training them in that sense. And even down to the grammatical side of things, trust yourself. Trust yourself, but that is part of being a writer, is learning where the comma goes, is learning what voice you need to use. And if it really does grate you and you really don't like it, that's what us editors are for. I've never bothered about a few typos and a few grammatical mistakes and punctuation. It's not a problem. But AI can really harsh the process, and it's taking something valuable away from not just your process as a writer, but everybody else in the creative space is being harmed by every single question that is pumped into ChatGPT.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that in terms of the creative process, I know a lot of sisters that I've worked with in the space of sort of helping them to develop their books and gaining confidence. They actually feel the harm internally when they've used AI as well. They don't feel themselves as complete and full writers because they ask this question of, should I have used it? Did I use it too much? Did I use it only in the research process? But have I, is the information sort of my information? Are these ideas my ideas? And so I don't know about, you know, whether or not it's ethical and, you know, all of these questions as to should you use it or should you not? But I would say that if you know yourself in terms of your level of confidence and how you want to develop yourself as a writer and the confidence you want to have in being able to say, this is completely my work, utilizing platforms like AI in a way that sort of really adds to the completion of your work, it's probably not the best way to go about it. We had a sister who was sort of talking about it online that, you know, if you're using it for research purposes, then it's fine. But as you said, you know, AI will kind of just give you, you'll type in a question, it will give you one form of an answer and one form of information and one, you know, it will select the sources for you essentially. And there is beauty in being able to kind of do that process yourself and collate that information. And then the harms, as you kind of rightly said, in terms of the environment and society and knowledge, that's something else that people need to think about as well, inshallah. So yeah, definitely lots to think about there. And
there is a difference. I just want to say there is a difference between generative AI and the AI, service AI and things like that. So it's important to learn. You know, we're not saying your spell check on Word is like, you know, evil and it's going to take over the world. No, we're saying it's the generative AI and the speed that it's, you know, changing and taking over is pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, just keep an eye on it. I think people just shouldn't get too heavily invested in that process of utilizing AI for every part of their story building. And then they should also recognize that it's very easy to sort of decipher AI within work as well. There are even AI systems built to detect AI within work. And so also be mindful of that, because I feel like especially traditional publishers are going to get into a process of having that inbuilt within their work soon.
They have. There are a lot of companies now, if you have used AI at any point in the process, they won't work with you. Same with freelance editors, they've got it in their policy. No, even if it was just for research purposes, they will not work with you.
Yeah, so just be mindful of that. Don't just kind of fall into the trap of people saying that, you know, you're going to be left behind if you don't use AI within your work. Be very, as Muslims, we're told to ask questions, we're told to kind of look into things and be very mindful about how we're using anything and incorporating anything into our lives. So we definitely sort of encourage you to look at that a bit more deeper and take it seriously, I think, as well. Some people just kind of are just like, it's AI, it's not a problem. Look into it a bit more, especially within the creative process, and then in terms of ideation, and even just the sort of the Islamic element of knowing that, for example, if you ask it to develop an idea for you, or you ask it to write your entire story, then you go off and sell that as your own, but you know that it's an amalgamation of other people's work. You have to think about whether or not that is, you know, whether or not that is permissible. I can't say it's halal, I can't say it's haram, but just in terms of what, you know, what we know about justice, but very much we should be questioning that, inshallah. Okay, heavy place to end, I think. Very much these are the conversations we need to be having within this space. And everybody should be very comfortable sort of asking these questions. So Jazakallah khair to everybody who engaged in the chat box. Jazakallah khair to everybody who joined and remained with us. Those who had to sort of tap out and tap in, we really, really appreciate your time. And then most importantly, our panelists. Barakallahu feekum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put so much barakah in your business, in your writing, in your daily lives, in your families. We really, really have appreciated all of the knowledge that you've shared with us. And that's a wrap on episode 2. We really hope you enjoyed this session and took away valuable insights. Make sure to follow us and leave your feedback because it helps us to create episodes that are truly useful for your writing journey. If you'd like to join our live masterclasses and have the chance to ask your questions directly to the experts, be sure to follow us on Instagram for all the latest updates. Thanks for listening, keep writing, and until next time, fi amanillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.